The morning sun had barely crested the jagged mountains when the first shot rang out. Ibrahim al-Rashid dropped to one knee behind a crumbling stone wall, his weathered hands gripping his rifle with the practiced ease of a man who had lived through countless battles. The air around him exploded into chaos, bullets whining overhead, dirt spraying from impact points, his men shouting orders in the controlled panic of seasoned soldiers. "Contact left, 200 meters." Sergeant Khalil's voice cut through the gunfire from somewhere behind a overturned jeep. The ambush had come from the narrow pass they'd been forced to traverse, a bottleneck that Ibrahim's instincts had warned him about, but necessity had compelled him to navigate. Ibrahim's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The enemy had chosen their position well: high ground, concealed firing positions, multiple escape routes. This wasn't a random encounter. This was planned, calculated, precise. Someone had known exactly where his convoy would be, exactly when they would pass through this valley. "Hamza, take your squad right. Flank them through the ravine." Ibrahim barked orders while returning fire. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Hamza Qadri, acknowledged with a sharp nod and led 4 men in a crouching run toward the eastern slope. Battle raged for 23 minutes. Ibrahim counted every second, his tactical mind cataloging ammunition expenditure, casualty assessments, and strategic options, even as adrenaline coursed through his veins. His men fought with the disciplined ferocity that had made his unit legendary among both allies and enemies. They moved like a single organism, each soldier anticipating the other's actions, covering retreats, coordinating advances with minimal verbal communication. When the last enemy fighter fell silent, Ibrahim allowed himself to breathe. The acrid smoke of gunpowder hung in the mountain air like incense in a war-torn mosque. He counted his men, all present, 3 wounded but mobile, a miracle, considering the intensity of the assault. "Commander." Sergeant Khalil approached, his uniform torn but his bearing still rigid with military precision. "We have a prisoner, sir. One of theirs got caught in Hamza's flanking maneuver." Ibrahim wiped blood from a shallow cut on his cheek where shrapnel had grazed him. His dark eyes, weathered by years of conflict but still sharp as obsidian, surveyed the battlefield one final time before focusing on his sergeant. "Bring him to me." The prisoner was young, perhaps 25, with the lean build of a mountain fighter. His olive-drab uniform bore no insignia, but Ibrahim recognized the tactical vest and weapons configuration of the rebel faction that had been harassing supply lines for months. Blood trickled from a split lip, and his left eye was already swelling shut from the rough treatment during capture. 2 of Ibrahim's men forced the prisoner to his knees on the rocky ground. The young fighter's hands were zip-tied behind his back, but his posture remained defiant despite his obvious pain. Ibrahim studied him for a long moment, noting the calluses on his hands, the scars that marked a veteran fighter, the way his eyes darted quickly around the area, still tactical, still assessing, even in captivity. "You fought well," Ibrahim said. Finally, his voice carrying the measured tone of a professional soldier addressing another. "Your positioning was excellent, your timing nearly perfect." He paused, crouching down so he was at eye level with the prisoner. "Too perfect." The young fighter's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Ibrahim continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You see, I've been fighting in these mountains for 15 years. I know every rock, every tree, every piece of cover. I know where the sight lines are, where the best ambush points are. That valley back there?" He gestured toward the pass where the attack had occurred. "It's a textbook kill zone, but it's also got 7 different approaches that most people don't know about. You knew about all of them." The prisoner's eyes flickered, just for an instant, but Ibrahim caught it. "You had men positioned to cover every escape route," Ibrahim pressed on. "You knew exactly how many vehicles would be in my convoy, exactly what time we'd pass through. You even knew which vehicle I'd be in." He leaned closer, his voice becoming even quieter. The only way you could know all that is if someone told you. Sweat beaded on the prisoner's forehead despite the cool mountain air. Ibrahim could see the conflict playing out behind the young man's eyes, loyalty to his cause warring with the growing realization that his captors knew far more than he'd expected. "I'm going to ask you once, and only once," Ibrahim said, his tone remaining conversational, but somehow more menacing for its calmness. "Who gave you the intelligence for this operation?" The prisoner's mouth opened, then closed. His breathing became shallow, rapid. Ibrahim could practically see the training. Kicking in, resist interrogation, reveal nothing, protect operational security. But there was something else there too. Something that looked almost like relief. The prisoner began, then stopped. He looked directly into Ibrahim's eyes for the first time. "I can't." Ibrahim nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. He stood, brushing dust from his knees, and walked a few steps away. The silence stretched out, broken only by the distant call of a mountain hawk and the low murmur of his men checking equipment and treating wounds. When Ibrahim turned back, his expression had changed. The professional courtesy was gone, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "Khalil," he called to his sergeant, "bring me the field interrogation kit." The prisoner's composure finally cracked. "Wait," he said quickly. "Wait. There's something you need to know." Ibrahim raised a hand, stopping Khalil mid-stride. He returned to crouch in front of the prisoner, his eyes never leaving the young man's face. "The information," the prisoner said, his voice barely audible. "It didn't come from outside your organization." The words hit Ibrahim like a physical blow. He felt his stomach clench, his vision narrow. "What are you saying?" "Someone on the inside," the prisoner continued, speaking rapidly now as if afraid he might lose his nerve. "Someone who knew your routes, your procedures, your security protocols. We never could have set this up without help from someone you trust." Ibrahim's world tilted. In all his years of warfare, he had faced enemy bullets, artillery, even chemical attacks. But this felt different, a violation that went beyond the physical into something deeper, more personal. "Who?" The word came out as a growl. The prisoner hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "I only know the code name they used. Desert Wolf. That's all they told us." Ibrahim's blood turned to ice. Desert Wolf. He knew that code name. It belonged to one of his most trusted officers, a man who had fought beside him for over a decade, a man he had considered closer than a brother, Malik ibn Rashad. The prisoner's words echoed in Ibrahim's mind as he stood motionless in the mountain air. Desert Wolf. He had given that code name to Malik himself, years ago during their first joint operation in the Southern Territories. It had been a mark of respect, recognition of Malik's tactical brilliance and unwavering courage under fire. Now, it felt like a mockery. Ibrahim's hands trembled, not from fear or adrenaline, but from the sheer magnitude of betrayal. Malik had been more than a subordinate or colleague. They had shared the brotherhood that only comes from facing death together repeatedly and emerging alive through mutual trust and protection. "Commander?" Sergeant Khalil's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Sir, are you all right?" Ibrahim forced himself to focus on the present moment. His men were watching him, looking for guidance, for orders, for the steady leadership they had come to depend on. He could not afford to show weakness or uncertainty, not when their lives might depend on his next decisions. "Secure the prisoner," Ibrahim said, his voice regaining its authoritative edge. "Full restraints, constant supervision. He's our only link to understanding how deep this goes." As his men carried out the orders, Ibrahim walked away from the group, needing a moment to process what he had learned. The mountain landscape stretched out before him, harsh, unforgiving terrain that had shaped him into the leader he had become. These mountains demanded strength, clarity, decisiveness. They had no patience for doubt or emotional turmoil, but as Ibrahim stared at the rocky peaks, his mind raced through years of memories. Malik joining his unit as a young lieutenant, eager and brilliant. Malik saving his life during the siege of Kala-i-Jangi, dragging him to safety while under heavy machine gun fire. Malik's wedding 5 years ago, where Ibrahim had served as best man and given a speech about brotherhood and loyalty that now tasted like ashes in his mouth. Malik's family. His wife Fatima, a teacher who always worried about her husband's dangerous work but never complained. Their children, 10-year-old Sarah and 7-year-old Ahmad, who called Ibrahim uncle and always ran to hug him when he visited their home. The prisoner had mentioned family, said they had been threatened. Ibrahim's tactical mind began to work through the implications. If Malik had been compromised through threats to his family, then this wasn't simple betrayal. It was coercion. The enemy had found Malik's weakness and exploited it with ruthless efficiency. In many ways, that made it worse. It meant they had been watching, studying, learning about Ibrahim's inner circle for months or perhaps years before making their move. It also meant Malik's family was in immediate danger. "Hamza," Ibrahim called to his lieutenant as the man approached with a situational report. "Sir, I need you to assemble a small team. 4 men, best we have for covert operations, full combat load but civilian clothes." Hamza's eyebrows rose slightly. "Special mission, sir?" "Intel gathering and possible extraction," Ibrahim replied carefully. "I'll brief you privately in 5 minutes." As Hamza moved off to select his team, Ibrahim pulled out his satellite phone, one of the few pieces of modern technology their unit possessed. He had a decision to make, and it would require resources and coordination beyond what his field unit could provide. The call connected after several rings. "Control, this is Sword Leader." "Sword Leader, this is Control." "Go ahead. I need a priority intelligence check on a family. Possible hostile surveillance or capture situation." Ibrahim provided Malik's family details, their last known address, and requested immediate but discreet verification of their status. "Copy, Sword Leader. Stand by for priority processing." While waiting for the response, Ibrahim gathered his senior officers, Hamza, Khalil, and Captain Yusuf al-Mansouri, his intelligence specialist. They formed a tight circle around a tactical map spread across the hood of their remaining operational vehicle. "Gentlemen," Ibrahim began, his voice low but carrying clearly to each man. "We have a significant operational security breach. The ambush was not coincidental. We have a compromised asset within our organization." The 3 officers exchanged glances but remained silent, waiting for their commander to continue. "The preliminary intelligence suggests that Lieutenant Malik ibn Rashad may have provided operational details to enemy forces." Ibrahim watched their faces carefully as he delivered this information. Shock, disbelief, and then professional concern crossed their features in sequence. Captain al-Mansouri spoke first. "Sir, with respect, Malik has been with us for 11 years. His loyalty record is exemplary. Is it possible the intelligence is false? Deliberate misinformation?" Ibrahim had hoped one of his officers would raise that possibility. It was a reasonable question, and it demonstrated the kind of critical thinking he valued in his leadership team. Possible, but unlikely given the specific details the prisoner provided. However, you raise an important point. We cannot act on incomplete information. "What are your orders, sir?" Hamza asked. "We proceed with extreme caution," Ibrahim replied. "Malik is currently at the northern outpost with 2nd Squad. We will not communicate our location or future movements through normal channels until this is resolved. All operational communications will flow through me personally, and I will brief each of you individually rather than through group channels." His satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. Ibrahim read it quickly, then looked up at his officers with grim expression. Malik's family was reported missing 3 days ago by neighbors who hadn't seen them. Local authorities found signs of struggle in their home, but no bodies, no ransom demands, no communication from kidnappers. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Malik's family had been taken. He had been compromised, forced to choose between his loyalty to his unit and the lives of his wife and children. In Malik's position, Ibrahim knew he might have made the same choice. But knowing the reason didn't change the consequences. Ibrahim spent the next 6 hours planning. Military training had taught him to compartmentalize emotions during tactical operations, but this situation tested those skills to their limits. He was planning to hunt down a man who had been like a brother to him, a man whose betrayal might have been motivated by love for his family rather than greed or ideological corruption. The complexity of the situation demanded a delicate approach. If Malik was being coerced through threats to his family, then simply arresting him might result in their deaths. But allowing him to remain in position compromised the safety of Ibrahim's entire unit and potentially dozens of other operations. Ibrahim's plan took shape slowly, methodically. First, he would need to locate and secure Malik's family, both to protect them and to remove the enemy's leverage. Second, he would need to confront Malik in a way that minimized risk to his other men while maximizing the chance of discovering the full extent of the security breach. Finally, he would need to determine whether Malik could be turned back to their side or whether the betrayal had gone too far for redemption. The rescue operation for Malik's family required precise intelligence. Ibrahim contacted his network of assets in the region, former soldiers, local tribal leaders, merchants who moved freely between territories controlled by different factions. Within hours, he had narrowed down 3 possible locations where hostages might be held. The most likely site was an abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of a small town 40 kilometers north of their current position. Recent intelligence indicated increased activity around the building, including the presence of vehicles that didn't belong to local residents. Ibrahim selected his team carefully. Hamza would lead the assault element, 4 men trained in close-quarters combat and hostage rescue. Captain Al-Mansouri would provide overwatch and intelligence support from a concealed position with line of sight to the target building. Sergeant Khalil would remain with the main unit, maintaining communication and ready to provide backup if needed. They moved out at dusk, traveling in a single unmarked pickup truck along back roads that wound through terraced hillsides and small farming villages. Ibrahim rode in the passenger seat, studying satellite photos and hand-drawn sketches provided by local assets. The factory was a 2-story concrete structure with few windows and multiple entrances. A defensive nightmare, but manageable with proper planning. As they approached the target area, Ibrahim felt the familiar calm that always descended on him before combat operations. Personal emotions receded, replaced by the cold clarity of tactical thinking. Whatever Malik had done, whatever his reasons, the immediate priority was protecting innocent lives. The factory sat in a shallow valley surrounded by abandoned agricultural equipment and overgrown fields. A single dirt road provided vehicle access, but there were multiple footpaths through the surrounding terrain. Al-Mansouri established his overwatch position on a low ridge 800 meters away, his rifle scope providing detailed observation of the building's exterior. "Control to all elements," Al-Mansouri's voice crackled through their radio headsets. "I have visual on 2 sentries north and west sides of the building. Light discipline is poor. They're smoking, not maintaining proper watch intervals." Ibrahim smiled grimly. Poor security protocols suggested these weren't elite enemy forces, probably local militia hired for this specific job. That would make the rescue operation easier, but also indicated that the real enemy commanders were somewhere else, directing operations from a safe distance. Hamza's team approached the building from the south, using the cover of rusted machinery and drainage ditches to move within 50 meters of their target. Ibrahim monitored their progress through his night vision scope, feeling the weight of command as he watched his men risk their lives based on his orders. Control. This is Assault Leader. Hamza's voice was barely audible through the radio. I have movement inside the building, second floor, northwest corner. At least 2 individuals, possibly more. Copy, Assault Leader. Weapon status. Sentries are carrying AK-47s. Standard load. No heavy weapons visible. Ibrahim made his decision. All elements, this is Sword Leader. Execute on my mark. He paused, letting the team prepare. Mark. The assault unfolded with practiced precision. Hamza's team eliminated the exterior sentries silently using suppressed weapons, then breached the building through 2 separate entrances simultaneously. The operation took less than 4 minutes from initiation to completion. When the gunfire stopped, Ibrahim heard the most beautiful sound in the world, children crying. Alive children, frightened, but unhurt. Sword Leader. This is Assault Leader. Hamza's voice carried obvious relief. Package secured. 3 individuals. 1 adult female, 2 minors. They're alive, minimal injuries. We also have 2 enemy KIA and 1 wounded prisoner. Ibrahim closed his eyes briefly, offering a silent prayer of gratitude. Malik's family was safe. Now came the harder part. Malik ibn Rashad sat in the communications bunker at the northern outpost, staring at a radio that had been silent for 6 hours. Ibrahim's unit should have checked in twice during that time, once at their midday halt and again upon reaching their evening position. The silence was eating at him like acid. He knew what the silence meant. The ambush had either succeeded completely, killing Ibrahim and his entire unit, or it had failed and Ibrahim was now operating under communication silence because he suspected a security breach. Either possibility filled Malik with a sick dread that no amount of rationalization could ease. 3 days ago, he had received a package at his home. Inside had been a smartphone with a single video file and a written message. The video showed his wife Fatima and his children Sarah and Ahmad tied to chairs in what looked like a basement or warehouse. All 3 were alive, but obviously terrified. Fatima's face was bruised and Sarah had been crying. The message was simple. Provide detailed information about Commander Ibrahim's movement schedule and route planning for the next 72 hours. If you refuse or attempt to warn anyone, your family will be executed. If you comply, they will be released unharmed after the operation is complete. You have 2 hours to confirm your cooperation by responding to this number. Malik had stared at the phone for 90 minutes, his hands shaking, his mind racing through every possible alternative. He could try to warn Ibrahim, but the kidnappers might kill his family before any rescue operation could be mounted. He could refuse to cooperate, but that would certainly result in his family's death. He could attempt to provide false information, but the enemy clearly had enough intelligence to verify his reports, and any deception would be discovered quickly. In the end, love for his family had overcome loyalty to his unit. He had sent the text message confirming his cooperation, then spent the most miserable 2 days of his life providing detailed intelligence about Ibrahim's planned route, timing, and security procedures. Now he sat in the communications bunker, knowing that his betrayal had either resulted in the death of the man he respected most in the world, or had set in motion a chain of events that would inevitably lead to his own discovery and punishment. The radio crackled to life, making Malik jump. Northern Base, this is Sword Leader. Ibrahim's voice, alive. Malik felt simultaneous relief and terror wash over him. Sword. Leader, this is Northern Base, Malik replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. Good to hear from you, sir. Status report? Minor engagement en route. All personnel accounted for. We'll be returning to base tomorrow for resupply and briefing. Copy that, sir. Should I prepare the briefing room? Negative. I'll handle briefing arrangements personally. Northern base out. The radio went silent. Malik stared at it for a long time, analyzing every word of the brief conversation. Ibrahim's tone had been completely professional, revealing nothing. But there had been something in the pause before his final transmission, a hesitation that suggested careful word choice. Malik had worked with Ibrahim long enough to recognize, when his commander was operating in a heightened state of awareness, Ibrahim suspected something. Over the next 18 hours, Malik wrestled with increasingly desperate options. He could attempt to run, but he had no idea where his family was, being held, or whether they were still alive. He could confess to Ibrahim and hope for mercy, but military justice for betraying one's unit during wartime was swift and final. He could try to maintain his cover and hope that Ibrahim's suspicions were unfounded, but that seemed increasingly unlikely. In the end, he decided to stay and face whatever consequences awaited him. If his family was still alive, running would only ensure their deaths. If they were already dead, then nothing else mattered anyway. Ibrahim's convoy arrived at the northern outpost at 13:47 hours the following day. Malik watched from the communications bunker as the vehicles pulled into the compound, noting that Ibrahim had brought more men than usual, nearly twice his normal escort strength. When Ibrahim emerged from the lead vehicle, Malik felt his breath catch. Even at a distance, he could see that his commander moved with the careful alertness of a man expecting trouble. Ibrahim's eyes swept the compound methodically, cataloging personnel positions, escape routes, and potential threats. His gaze lingered on the communications bunker for several seconds before moving on. Malik forced himself to follow normal procedures. He completed his shift logs, briefed his replacement, and prepared to report to Ibrahim for the routine debriefing that followed any extended field operation. But as he walked across the compound toward Ibrahim's office, he noticed that several of the new arrivals had positioned themselves casually but strategically around the area, not quite surrounding him, but certainly observing his movements. Ibrahim's office was located in the central building of the outpost, a reinforced concrete structure that had once served as a government administrative center before the war transformed it into a military command post. Malik knocked on the heavy, wooden door and waited for permission to enter. "Come." Ibrahim sat behind his desk, still wearing his field uniform, his hands folded in front of him. The office was Spartan, military maps on the walls, a single bookshelf filled with tactical manuals and regional intelligence reports, a photograph of Ibrahim receiving a commendation from the defense minister 3 years earlier. "Sit down, Malik." There was something in Ibrahim's tone that confirmed Malik's worst fears. His commander knew, perhaps not everything, but enough. Malik took the chair across from Ibrahim's desk, fighting to maintain his composure. "Welcome back, sir. I trust the operation was successful?" Ibrahim studied him for a long moment before responding. "That depends on how you define success. We accomplished our primary objective, but we discovered some concerning intelligence along the way. Sir, it appears that our operational security has been compromised. The enemy had detailed information about our movements, our routes, our timing." Ibrahim's voice remained calm, professional. Information that could only have come from someone with access to our planning process. Malik felt sweat forming on his forehead. That's very serious, sir. Do we know how the breach occurred?" "We're investigating several possibilities." Ibrahim's eyes never left Malik's face. "Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual recently? Any personnel acting suspiciously? Any security procedures that might have been violated?" The question was a test, and both men knew it. Malik had two choices: continue denying everything and hope Ibrahim's evidence was incomplete, or confess and hope for mercy. "Sir," Malik began, then stopped. His throat felt dry, constricted. There's something I need to tell you." Ibrahim leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanging. "I'm listening." "My family," Malik said, the words coming out in a rush. 3 days ago they were taken. Kidnapped. I received communication from the kidnappers with demands. Ibrahim remained silent, waiting. They wanted intelligence about your operations. They said if I didn't cooperate, they would kill Fatima and the children. Malik's voice broke slightly on his children's names. I'm sorry, Ibrahim. I'm so sorry. I tried to give them just enough to satisfy them without putting you in real danger, but the ambush nearly killed me and my entire unit. Ibrahim finished quietly. Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. Ibrahim stood up slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the compound where soldiers went about their duties, unaware of the drama playing out in the command office. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire room. How long have we known each other, Malik? 11 years, sir. 11 years, Ibrahim repeated. 11 years of fighting together, bleeding together, trusting each other with our lives. He turned back to face Malik. In all that time, did you ever doubt that I would move heaven and earth to protect your family if they were threatened? The question hit Malik like a physical blow. He had been so focused on the immediate threat, so paralyzed by fear for his family's safety, that he hadn't considered other options. Or perhaps he had considered them and rejected them because the risk seemed too great. I couldn't take the chance, Malik said quietly. They showed me video. Fatima was hurt. The children were terrified. I couldn't think of anything except getting them back safely. Ibrahim walked back to his desk but didn't sit down. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. From it, he extracted several photographs and placed them on the desk, where Malik could see them. The photographs showed Malik's family, Fatima, Sarah, and Ahmad, sitting in what appeared to be a military medical facility. They were clean, uninjured, and while obviously stressed, they appeared to be in good health. Malik stared at the photographs, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. How? We recovered them 6 hours ago, Ibrahim said. My assault team located the facility where they were being held and extracted them successfully. They're safe, Malik. They're under protection at a secure location. Relief flooded through Malik so powerfully that he nearly collapsed. His family was alive. They were safe. For 3 days, he had carried the crushing weight of their danger, and now it was lifted. But relief was quickly followed by a new understanding of his situation. Ibrahim had rescued his family. Ibrahim had saved the people Malik loved most in the world. And Malik had betrayed him. Why? Malik asked, though he wasn't sure if he was asking why Ibrahim had saved his family or why he himself had made the choices he had made. Ibrahim returned to his chair, his expression still unreadable. Because I understand that you were placed in an impossible situation. Because I know you well enough to recognize the difference between calculated betrayal and desperate coercion. And because I believe that good men can make terrible choices under terrible circumstances. Sir, Ibrahim held up a hand, stopping him. But understanding your motivation doesn't change what happened. Your information led to an ambush that could have killed 12 good soldiers. Your betrayal, even under coercion, represents a fundamental breach of trust that undermines the foundation of our entire operation. Malik nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come if he survived the immediate crisis. Military justice was clear on the subject of providing aid to enemy forces, regardless of the circumstances. I'm placing you under arrest, Ibrahim continued. You'll be transferred to headquarters for formal interrogation and court-martial proceedings. I understand, sir. But, Ibrahim said, his voice softening slightly, I'm also recommending that the court consider the coercive circumstances of your actions. Your family's situation will be documented and presented as mitigating evidence. 2 soldiers entered the office, Hamza and Khalil, both armed but not threatening. Their faces showed the complex emotions of men arresting someone they had considered a friend and comrade. As they placed restraints on Malik's wrists, Ibrahim spoke one final time. "Your family will remain under our protection. Whatever happens to you, they will be safe. You have my word." Malik looked up at Ibrahim, his eyes filled with gratitude and regret in equal measure. "Thank you, sir, for everything." After Malik was led away, Ibrahim sat alone in his office as evening shadows lengthened across the compound. The immediate crisis was resolved, but its effects would linger. His unit would need time to rebuild trust, to establish new security, procedures, to heal from the psychological wound of internal betrayal. More importantly, Ibrahim knew that he himself would need time to process what had happened. Command required making difficult decisions, but few decisions were as complex as determining the fate of a friend who had betrayed you for reasons you understood but could not accept. While Malik was being transported to headquarters under heavy guard, Ibrahim focused on extracting intelligence from the wounded prisoner captured during the factory raid. The man had been treated by their medic and was conscious but clearly in pain from a gunshot wound to his shoulder. Unlike the young fighter from the mountain ambush, this prisoner was older, more experienced, and considerably more resistant to interrogation. Captain Al-Mansouri had identified him as a senior operative in the enemy organization, someone likely to have detailed knowledge of their intelligence networks and operational capabilities. The interrogation took place in a secured room within the outpost's administration building. Ibrahim sat across a metal table from the prisoner, who had given his name as Hassan al-Duri and claimed to be a farmer from a village 60 kilometers away. His story was plausible but inconsistent with his military-style haircut, the calluses on his hands that indicated extensive weapons training, and the tactical knowledge he had displayed during the firefight. "Hassan," Ibrahim said, his tone conversational, "I'm going to be direct with you. We both know you're not a farmer. Your combat skills, your knowledge of weapons, your presence at a hostage-holding facility, all of that tells a different story." The prisoner said nothing, staring at a point on the wall behind Ibrahim's head. "Here's what I find interesting," Ibrahim continued. "The operation to kidnap Lieutenant Malik's family required detailed surveillance of his personal life. Someone had to know his daily routines, his family's schedules, their security arrangements. That kind of intelligence takes time to develop." Still no response. Ibrahim pulled out a tablet computer and showed Hassan a map of the region. "This factory where we found the hostages, it's been abandoned for 2 years, but someone prepared. It's specifically for holding prisoners. Reinforced doors, barred windows, communication equipment. This wasn't an improvised operation." Hassan's eyes flickered toward the tablet screen before returning to the wall. "Which suggests that your organization has been planning to compromise my unit for months, possibly longer." Ibrahim leaned forward slightly. "The question is, how many other operations are you running? How many other families have you targeted? How many other soldiers are being coerced?" For the first time, Hassan looked directly at Ibrahim. "You think you've won something? Rescued one family? Captured a few fighters?" His voice carried a bitter edge. "This is bigger than you understand." Ibrahim felt a chill run down his spine. "Explain." Hassan smiled, though it looked more like a grimace due to his swollen lip. "Your Lieutenant Malik was just the beginning. We've been watching your entire command structure for over a year. We know where your officers live, where their families shop, where their children go to school." The implications hit Ibrahim immediately. If the enemy had conducted comprehensive surveillance of his leadership team, then Malik's compromise might be just one element of a much larger operation designed to destroy his unit from within. "How many?" Ibrahim asked quietly. "Enough," Hassan replied. "And unlike your Lieutenant Malik, not all of them will have such obvious pressure points. Some people can be bought. Others have ideological motivations you know nothing about. A few just enjoy the thrill of betrayal." Ibrahim stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. The scope of what Hassan was describing represented a security nightmare that could take months to unravel. Every officer in his command would need to be investigated, their families checked for signs of surveillance or coercion, their financial records examined for evidence of bribery. "Give me names," Ibrahim demanded. Hassan shook his head. "I don't have names. I was compartmentalized like any good operative. I know about Malik because I was directly involved in leveraging his family. The others are handled by different teams." "Then give me something useful. Operational methods, communication protocols, anything that might help us identify other compromised personnel." Hassan was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh his options. Finally, he spoke. "There's a pattern to how we select targets. We look for officers with families, particularly those with young children. We look for personnel with financial difficulties or personal problems that might make them vulnerable to approach. And we look for people who have access to operational planning but aren't senior enough to have extensive security protection." It was a professional assessment, and Ibrahim recognized its accuracy. His own security protocols focused primarily on protecting senior commanders while assuming that junior officers were less likely targets for enemy attention. That assumption now appeared to be dangerously naive. "There's something else," Hassan continued. "The operation against your unit is part of a larger campaign. Your organization has been designated as a high-priority target because of your effectiveness in disrupting our supply lines and recruitment efforts." Ibrahim felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. His success as a military leader had made his unit a target not just for direct attack, but for systematic infiltration and subversion. Every victory his men had achieved had painted a larger target on their backs. "How long do we have?" Ibrahim asked. "Until what?" "Until the next phase of your operation begins." Hassan's expression became guarded again. "I don't know. I was only briefed on the immediate mission." Ibrahim studied the man's face, looking for signs of deception. His experience suggested that Hassan was telling the truth, or at least not lying outright. Intelligence operations were typically compartmentalized to prevent exactly this kind of information spillage during interrogation. "Captain al-Mansouri," Ibrahim called to his intelligence officer, who had been observing the interrogation from the corner of the room. "Sir, I want a complete security review of all personnel initiated immediately. Financial records, family surveillance, communication patterns, everything. And I want additional security assigned to the families of all. Senior personnel within 24 hours. Al-Mansouri nodded grimly. "It will require significant resources, sir. We'll need to coordinate with headquarters for additional investigators and protection teams." "Do it," Ibrahim ordered. "Whatever resources we need." He turned back to Hassan. "You've been cooperative so far. Continue that cooperation, and I'll ensure you receive proper medical treatment and consideration during processing." Hassan studied Ibrahim for a moment. "You know, Commander, in different circumstances, I think I might have respected you. You care about your men, protect their families, honor your commitments. Those are admirable qualities. But you're fighting for the wrong side," Hassan said simply, "and that makes you my enemy, regardless of your personal character." Ibrahim felt a moment of philosophical vertigo. In Hassan's mind, Ibrahim was the villain, the oppressor, the source of injustice that needed to be fought. Yet from Ibrahim's perspective, Hassan represented chaos, terrorism, the destruction of order and stability. Both men were probably sincere in their beliefs. Both probably saw themselves as protecting their people from those who would harm them. War, Ibrahim reflected, was rarely about good versus evil. More often, it was about competing visions of what society should become, competing loyalties, competing definitions of justice. The tragedy was that such conflicts could only be resolved through violence, leaving everyone involved scarred by the experience. Perhaps, Ibrahim said finally. But we are what we are, and we must play the roles we've chosen. 3 days after Hassan's interrogation, Ibrahim received an encrypted message from headquarters that changed everything. Captain al-Mansouri's security review had uncovered evidence of a second compromised officer, Major Farid Qasim, the unit's logistics coordinator, and a man Ibrahim had known for 8 years. Unlike Malik, whose betrayal had been motivated by threats to his family, Major Qasim appeared to have been providing intelligence to enemy forces in exchange for substantial financial payments. Bank records showed deposits totaling nearly $50,000 over the past 6 months, far exceeding his military salary and family income. The discovery shattered Ibrahim's remaining assumptions about the security of his command. If the enemy had successfully compromised both his operations officer and his logistics coordinator, they potentially had access to every aspect of his unit's activities: troop movements, supply schedules, equipment inventories, communication, frequencies, and tactical planning. Ibrahim sat in his office, staring at the intelligence report, feeling the weight of betrayal multiplying. Malik's actions had been understandable, even if unforgivable. A desperate father trying to save his children could be viewed with some sympathy. But Qasim had sold out his comrades for money, pure and simple. There was no coercion, no external pressure, just greed and moral corruption. "Sir?" Lieutenant Hamza stood in the doorway, awaiting permission to enter. "Come in. Close the door." Hamza took the chair across from Ibrahim's desk, noting his commander's grim expression. "The Qasim situation, sir?" "Among other things," Ibrahim replied. "Hamza, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, sir." "In your assessment, how many of our personnel do you trust completely? Not professionally, not based on their records or their performance, but trust with your life and the lives of every man in this unit?" Hamza considered the question carefully. "Honestly, sir, after the past week, maybe 6 or 7 men, the core group we've been with for years who've proven themselves repeatedly in combat." Ibrahim nodded. It was roughly the same number he had reached in his own assessment. Out of 42 personnel in his unit, he could identify fewer than 10 whom he would trust with sensitive operational information. "We're going to restructure completely," Ibrahim said. "New communication protocols, new operational procedures, new security arrangements, and we're going to conduct our own investigation into the backgrounds and activities of every person in this command. That's going to take time, sir. And during that time, our operational effectiveness will be severely reduced. Better reduced. Effectiveness than complete compromise," Ibrahim replied. "The enemy has been playing a long game, systematically infiltrating our organization. We need to assume that everything they've learned over the past year has been passed to their commanders." Hamza shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Sir, there's something else we need to discuss. Morale among the men is concerning. Word has gotten out about Malik and Qasim. The soldiers are starting to look at each other with suspicion, wondering who else might be compromised." Ibrahim had expected this problem. Trust was the foundation of military effectiveness, and once that foundation was cracked, the damage could spread rapidly through an entire unit. Soldiers who doubted their comrades' loyalty became hesitant, uncertain, afraid to share information or coordinate effectively. "Gather the senior NCOs," Ibrahim ordered. "I want to address this directly before it gets worse." An hour later, Ibrahim stood before his assembled sergeants and corporals in the main briefing room. These were the backbone of his unit. Experienced soldiers who had earned the respect of their subordinates through years of competent leadership under fire. If he could maintain their confidence, they would help stabilize the morale of the entire command. "Gentlemen," Ibrahim began, his voice carrying the authority that had made him one of the most effective commanders in the region. "You've all heard about the recent security breaches. Some of you are wondering how extensive the problem might be. Others are questioning whether you can trust the men you fight beside. He paused, making eye contact with each NCO in turn. I'm going to give you the truth, all of it. We have confirmed evidence that at least 2 of our officers provided intelligence to enemy forces. Lieutenant Malik was coerced through threats to his family. Major Qassem was paid. We have reason to believe there may be others, but we don't know how many or who they might be. Several of the sergeants exchanged glances, but no one spoke. This situation is serious, but it is not unprecedented. Every military organization in history has faced the challenge of internal betrayal. What matters is how we respond to that challenge. Ibrahim's voice gained intensity. We will conduct thorough investigations. We will implement new security procedures. We will rebuild our operational capabilities on a foundation of verified loyalty and trust. Sergeant First Class Mahmoud, the most senior NCO in the unit, raised his hand. Sir, what about the men who are innocent? How do we maintain unit cohesion when everyone is under suspicion? It was an excellent question, and Ibrahim had been wrestling with it himself. By being transparent about our process and fair in our methods. By remembering that the vast majority of our personnel are loyal, dedicated soldiers who deserve our confidence until proven otherwise. And by focusing on our mission rather than allowing paranoia to consume us. Another sergeant spoke up. Sir, how do we know the investigation itself won't be compromised? If the enemy has people inside our organization, they might be able to manipulate the process. Ibrahim smiled grimly. Because the investigation will be conducted by personnel from outside our unit, working directly with headquarters security, and because we'll verify everything through multiple independent sources. Over the next 2 hours, Ibrahim answered questions, addressed concerns, and outlined the new procedures that would govern their operations. The meeting was difficult but necessary. By its conclusion, he felt that his NCOs understood both the seriousness of the situation and his commitment to resolving it fairly. After the sergeants departed, Ibrahim remained in the briefing room, alone with his thoughts. The past week had aged him years. The weight of command had always been heavy, but the betrayal of trusted subordinates added a dimension of personal pain that he had never experienced before. A knock on the door interrupted his reflection. Enter! Captain Al-Mansouri stepped inside, carrying a thick folder of documents. Sir, I have the preliminary results from the expanded security review. Ibrahim gestured to a chair. What did you find? Good news and bad news, Al-Mansouri replied. The good news is that we've found no evidence of additional financial corruption. Qassem appears to have been the only one taking direct payments from enemy sources. And the bad news? We've identified 3 more personnel who show patterns of behavior consistent with potential coercion. Family members who have gone missing for short periods, unusual changes in personal routines, signs of stress or anxiety that can't be explained by normal operational pressures. Ibrahim felt his stomach tighten. Names? Lieutenant Colonel Anwar, Sergeant Hassan, and Corporal Majid. All 3 have exhibited behavioral changes over the past several months that suggest external pressure. Lieutenant Colonel Anwar was Ibrahim's second-in-command, a man he had relied on for tactical advice and operational planning for over 3 years. If Anwar was compromised, then virtually every aspect of the unit's activities might have been exposed to enemy intelligence. What kind of behavioral changes? Ibrahim asked. Anwar has been working longer hours, staying in his office after normal duty hours, accessing files outside his normal responsibilities. His wife mentioned to the investigators that he's been having difficulty sleeping and has become withdrawn from family activities. That could describe any officer under stress, Ibrahim observed. What else? Sergeant Hassan's mother was reported missing by local authorities 6 weeks ago. She was found 3 days later, claiming to have visited relatives. But the relatives deny she was there. Hassan hasn't reported the incident through normal channels, and he's requested additional leave time to handle family matters. And Corporal Majid? His younger brother was arrested by local police on drug charges 2 months ago. The charges were dropped without explanation after Majid made several visits to police headquarters. According to our sources, the brother is now working with a civilian contractor that has suspected ties to enemy intelligence networks. Ibrahim processed this information slowly. Each case by itself might be explained by coincidence or normal life complications. Together, they suggested a pattern of systematic pressure being applied to his personnel through their families and personal relationships. Recommendations, Ibrahim asked. Immediate reassignment for all three, pending full investigation. We can't afford to have potentially compromised personnel in sensitive positions while we're trying to rebuild our security. Ibrahim knew al-Mansouri was right, but the implications were staggering. He was looking at the possibility of losing his second-in-command and 2 key NCOs in addition to the officers already compromised. His unit's leadership structure would be gutted. Do it, Ibrahim said finally, but handle it carefully. These men may be innocent victims of enemy pressure, not willing collaborators. I don't want them treated as criminals until we know more. The investigation and restructuring process took 6 weeks. During that time, Ibrahim's unit operated at reduced capacity, focusing on defensive operations and intelligence gathering rather than major offensive actions. It was a frustrating period, but necessary for rebuilding their operational security. The final results were better than Ibrahim had feared, but worse than he had hoped. Lieutenant Colonel Anwar and Sergeant Hassan were cleared of any wrongdoing. Their behavioral changes had been caused by legitimate family pressures unrelated to enemy activity. Corporal Majid, however, had been providing information about guard schedules and patrol routes in exchange for his brother's protection from local criminal elements that were working with enemy intelligence. Like Malik, Majid had been coerced rather than corrupted. Unlike Malik, his betrayal had been limited in scope and hadn't resulted in direct attacks on his comrades. The court-martial proceedings recommended a reduction in rank and transfer to a non-sensitive position rather than imprisonment. Major Qasim's case was more straightforward. Financial records revealed a clear pattern of payments corresponding to intelligence he had provided about supply convoys and logistics operations. Several successful enemy attacks on supply lines could be directly traced to information he had sold. He was court-martialed and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. With the investigation complete, Ibrahim faced the task of rebuilding his unit's effectiveness while maintaining the new security procedures that would prevent future penetration. It required a delicate balance between operational security and the trust necessary for military effectiveness. The solution came from an unexpected source: his enlisted personnel. Sergeant First Class Mahmoud approached Ibrahim with a proposal developed by the unit's NCOs. They suggested implementing a buddy system where personnel would be paired with trusted colleagues for all sensitive activities. No one would handle classified information alone, and everyone would have a partner responsible for monitoring their behavior and well-being. It was a system based on mutual accountability rather than top-down surveillance. Instead of assuming that anyone might be compromised, it assumed that paired personnel would protect each other from external pressure while providing security oversight for sensitive operations. Ibrahim approved the proposal and worked with his remaining officers to implement it across all aspects of their operations. Within a month, the system had not only improved security, but had actually enhanced unit cohesion by creating stronger bonds between personnel. The first test of their rebuilt capabilities came when headquarters assigned them a mission to neutralize an enemy supply depot that had been established in the abandoned ruins of an old monastery. Intelligence indicated that the depot was heavily defended and contained weapons and ammunition intended for a major enemy offensive. Ibrahim planned the operation meticulously, using the new security procedures to ensure that operational details were compartmentalized and verified through multiple sources. Only personnel directly involved in specific aspects of the mission had access to relevant information, and all planning sessions included paired personnel to prevent any individual from having complete knowledge of the operation. The attack was launched at dawn on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. Ibrahim's forces approached the monastery from 3 directions, using the broken terrain and early morning mist to conceal their movements. The assault was coordinated through encrypted communications and executed with the precision that had made Ibrahim's unit famous throughout the region. The enemy was caught completely off guard. Their sentries were eliminated silently, their defensive positions overrun before they could organize effective resistance. Within 2 hours, Ibrahim's forces had secured the monastery, captured significant quantities of weapons and ammunition, and taken 17 enemy prisoners for intelligence processing. More importantly, the operation had been conducted without any security breaches or compromises. The enemy had shown no advanced knowledge of the attack, no unusual defensive preparations, no indication that they had received warning through infiltrated sources. As Ibrahim walked through the captured monastery, watching his men secure equipment and process prisoners, he felt a sense of professional satisfaction that had been absent since the betrayals had been discovered. His unit was whole again, functional again, trustworthy again. But the scars remained. The easy camaraderie that had once characterized his command had been replaced by something more cautious, more professional, perhaps more mature. His soldiers still trusted each other, but it was a trust that had been tested and proven rather than simply assumed. Ibrahim himself had changed as well. The naive confidence that had allowed him to trust subordinates completely had been replaced by a more complex understanding of human nature and the pressures that could corrupt even good people. He was a better commander now, more aware of the vulnerabilities that could be exploited by enemies who understood that military units were composed of human beings with families, fears, and weaknesses. 6 months after the monastery operation, Ibrahim received orders transferring him to a senior position at regional headquarters. His unit would be integrated into a larger formation under new command, and he would assume responsibility for coordinating anti-infiltration operations across multiple sectors. It was a promotion that recognized his success in rebuilding his compromised unit and developing new security procedures that were being implemented throughout the military. But it also meant leaving the men he had led through some of the most challenging periods of the war. On his last day with the unit, Ibrahim gathered his personnel for a final address. They assembled in the same briefing room where he had announced the security breaches months earlier, but the atmosphere was completely different. These were seasoned veterans who had been tested by betrayal and had emerged stronger and more cohesive. "Gentlemen," Ibrahim began, "when I assumed command of this unit 4 years ago, I thought I understood what leadership meant. I thought it was about tactical brilliance, personal courage, and inspiring others to follow you into danger." He paused, looking at the faces of men who had shared the worst and best experiences of his military career. "I was wrong. Leadership is about understanding that the people who follow you are complex human beings with fears, loyalties, and pressures that extend far beyond military service. It's about protecting them not just from enemy bullets, but from the moral compromises that war demands. And it's about creating an environment where good people can make good choices even when those choices are difficult." Ibrahim saw nods of understanding throughout the room. These men had learned the same lessons he had, often at great personal cost. "Some of you have asked me what I learned from the betrayals we experienced. The lesson isn't that people are untrustworthy or that loyalty is meaningless. The lesson is that trust must be earned continuously, that loyalty must be supported by just leadership, and that even good people can be broken by circumstances beyond their control." He thought of Malik, now serving a reduced sentence at a minimum security facility, and of Corporal Majid, who had been transferred to a supply unit where his skills were valued, but his access to sensitive information was limited. Both men had paid prices for their choices, but both had also been treated with the mercy that their circumstances warranted. The enemy tried to destroy this unit by turning us against each other. They failed because you refused to let suspicion, Replace trust, because you chose to support each other rather than succumb to paranoia, and because you understood that our strength comes from our unity rather than our individual capabilities. Ibrahim's voice carried the emotion he felt, but rarely expressed. It has been my honor to serve with you. You are the finest soldiers I have ever known, and you have taught me lessons about leadership, loyalty, and redemption that I will carry for the rest of my life. After the ceremony, Ibrahim spent individual time with his senior NCOs and officers, providing guidance for their continued service and ensuring that the lessons learned would be passed on to future personnel. Sergeant First Class Mahmoud, who would soon be promoted to Sergeant Major, received particular attention as the man who would help maintain unit cohesion and institutional memory. The new commander is a good officer, Ibrahim told Mahmoud, but he hasn't experienced what you've experienced. Help him understand that security isn't just about procedures and protocols. It's about understanding people and creating conditions where they can resist external pressure. As Ibrahim's vehicle pulled away from the outpost for the last time, he reflected on the transformation he had undergone. The confident young officer who had assumed command 4 years earlier had been replaced by a leader who understood the complexity of human nature and the moral ambiguities of warfare. At regional headquarters, Ibrahim's new responsibilities involved coordinating security operations across 12 different units, implementing the lessons learned from his own experience with infiltration and betrayal. It was challenging work that required diplomatic skills as well as military expertise, since many commanders were reluctant to acknowledge that their units might be vulnerable to the same problems Ibrahim had faced. But gradually, the new procedures took hold. Security reviews became routine rather than exceptional. Personnel support programs were developed to help soldiers deal with family pressures and financial difficulties. Communication protocols were redesigned to limit the damage that could be caused by any single compromised individual. The war continued as wars do, with victories and defeats, advances and retreats, moments of heroism and instances of moral failure. But the military organization that emerged from Ibrahim's reforms was stronger, more resilient, and better prepared to face enemies who understood that the strongest fortresses could be breached from within if the right pressures were applied to the right people. Years later, when military historians analyzed the conflict, they would note that the most significant development wasn't a new weapon system or tactical innovation, but rather the evolution of security procedures that treated soldiers as human beings rather than simply components in a military machine. The understanding that loyalty was something that had to be earned and supported rather than commanded and assumed became a fundamental principle of professional military service. Ibrahim's name would be remembered not for any single battle or dramatic victory, but for the quiet work of rebuilding trust after betrayal, of creating systems that protected good people from impossible choices, and of demonstrating that true strength came from understanding and supporting the human beings who comprised military units. The war eventually ended, as all wars do, with negotiated settlements that satisfied no one completely, but allowed everyone to claim some measure of victory. Ibrahim retired with the rank of brigadier general, his career marked by steady advancement and consistent success in increasingly complex assignments. But his proudest achievement remained the rebuilding of his unit after the betrayals that had nearly destroyed it. In his final evaluation report, he wrote, "Military victory requires tactical skill, strategic vision, and operational excellence. But military success requires something more fundamental: the ability to create conditions where good people can remain good people even under the worst possible circumstances." 5 years after the end of active hostilities, Ibrahim received a letter forwarded through military channels. The return address showed it had come from a civilian rehabilitation center, and the handwriting was familiar despite the years that had passed. The letter was from Malik ibn Rashad. "Dear Commander Ibrahim," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well and that you have found peace in your retirement. I write to you not seeking forgiveness. I know that some actions cannot be forgiven, but to share what my experiences have taught me and to express gratitude that I hope you will understand. I have spent 3 years in prison and 2 years in civilian rehabilitation, learning to live with the choices I made during the war. The psychologists tell me that I was placed in an impossible situation, that any father would have made the same choice to protect his children. Perhaps that is true. But I have learned that understanding the reasons for our actions does not eliminate our responsibility for their consequences. You saved my family. More than that, you ensured that they were protected and provided for during my imprisonment. Fatima tells me that she and the children received regular support payments from a military welfare fund, and that their security was monitored throughout the period when they might have been targets for retaliation. I know this support came from your personal intervention. But what I am most grateful for is something else entirely. You treated me as a man who had made a terrible choice under terrible circumstances, rather than as a traitor who deserved only punishment. The difference between those two judgments is the difference between despair and redemption. During my trial, the prosecutor argued that my betrayal was unforgivable, that military discipline required harsh punishment regardless of the circumstances. The defense attorney argued that I was a victim of enemy coercion who deserved mercy. Both perspectives had merit, but both missed something essential. Your testimony provided a third perspective. You acknowledged the severity of my actions and their consequences. You supported appropriate punishment. But you also insisted that the court consider not just what I had done, but who I had been and who I might become. You argued that justice required not just punishment for past actions, but opportunity for future redemption. I am now working as a teacher in a village school, trying to help young people understand the importance of making good choices even when those choices are difficult. Some of my students are children who lost parents during the war. Others are children whose parents made choices they regret. All of them are learning that the future is not determined by the past, that people can change, and that redemption is possible even after serious moral failure. I think of you often, especially when I face difficult decisions in my new life. I ask myself what you would do, how you would balance competing obligations, how you would find the right course when all available options seem inadequate. Your example continues to guide me, even though we have not spoken in years. My family is well. Sarah is now 15 and wants to study medicine. Ahmad is 12 and dreams of becoming an engineer. Fatima teaches at the same school where I work, and we have found a kind of peace that we never expected to experience again. The war took much from us, but it also taught us lessons about what truly matters. I hope that time has brought you similar peace. You carried heavy burdens during the war, made difficult decisions that affected many lives, and bore responsibility for things that were beyond anyone's control. I hope you know that your leadership saved lives, that your example inspired others to be better than they might have been alone, and that your commitment to treating people fairly made a difference that extends far beyond any military objective. With respect and gratitude, Malik ibn Rashad. Ibrahim read the letter 3 times, sitting in the garden of the small house where he had retired. The afternoon sun filtered through olive trees he had planted when he first moved to this peaceful village, and somewhere in the distance he could hear children playing in the school courtyard. The letter stirred complex emotions. Pride that Malik had found productive purpose in civilian life. Sadness for the costs that war had imposed on all of them. Satisfaction that the approach he had taken, balancing justice with mercy, punishment with opportunity for redemption, had produced positive results. But most of all, the letter reminded him of the weight that leaders carry long after their active service ends. The decisions made in moments of crisis continue to affect people for years afterward. The example set under pressure becomes part of other people's moral framework. The precedents established during difficult times shape how future generations think about leadership, justice, and the possibility of redemption. Ibrahim walked to his desk and began writing a response. There were things he wanted to say to Malik, thoughts he wanted to share about leadership and redemption and the long process of healing that follows moral injury. But as he wrote, he realized he was also writing for himself, trying to articulate lessons that had taken years to understand fully. "Dear Malik," he began, "your letter arrived at a moment when I was reflecting on the war years and trying to understand what they taught me about leadership and human nature. Your words remind me that the most important battles we fight are often internal, the struggle to remain true to our values when circumstances pressure us to compromise, the effort to balance competing loyalties and obligations, the challenge of living with consequences of choices made under conditions we could never have anticipated. You write that you seek no forgiveness, but I think you misunderstand the nature of forgiveness. It is not something that erases the past or eliminates consequences. Rather, it is a recognition that people are capable of growth, that mistakes do not define us permanently, and that redemption is possible even after serious moral failure. You made a choice that endangered the lives of men who trusted you. That choice had consequences that could not be avoided. But you made that choice out of love for your family, not from greed or malice or ideological corruption. The difference matters, not because it eliminates responsibility, but because it suggests possibilities for redemption that might not exist otherwise. Your current work as a teacher represents that redemption. You are using the lessons learned from your mistakes to help others avoid similar failures. You are contributing to society in a way that honors the values you compromised during the war. You are demonstrating that people can change, that the future need not be determined by the past. This, I believe, is what true justice looks like. Not simply punishment for past actions, but opportunity and obligation to do better in the future. The goal is not to balance some cosmic scale of right and wrong, but to create conditions where good choices become more likely and moral failures become opportunities for growth rather than permanent condemnation. Thank you for your letter, and for the reminder that leadership extends far beyond the immediate circumstances where it is exercised. The example we set, the decisions we make, the way we treat people in crisis, all of these continue to influence others long after we have moved on to other responsibilities. I am glad your family is well and that you have found purposeful work. The war is over, but the work of building a better world continues. It is work that requires all of us, former enemies and former comrades alike, to be better than we were during the worst moments of the conflict. With respect for your journey toward redemption, Ibrahim al-Rashid. As evening fell over the quiet village, Ibrahim sealed the letter and walked to the local post office to send it. The war seemed like a lifetime ago, but its lessons remained relevant. Trust had to be earned continuously. Leadership required understanding people as complex beings with competing loyalties. Justice meant balancing accountability with opportunity for redemption. And perhaps most importantly, the choices made under pressure continued to matter long after the immediate crisis had passed. The weight of leadership was not just in making good decisions during difficult times, but in living with those decisions and their consequences for years afterward. The war was over, but the work of being human, of choosing good over evil, redemption over condemnation, hope over despair, continued. It was work that required courage, wisdom, and the understanding that even in the darkest moments, people were capable of growth and change. As Ibrahim walked home through the peaceful streets of his village, he carried with him the weight of memory and the hope of redemption. Both were necessary burdens for anyone who had exercised power over others' lives. Both were reminders that leadership meant not just commanding others, but accepting responsibility for the long-term consequences of every decision made under pressure. The story continued, as all human stories do, with imperfect people trying to do better than they had done before, carrying forward the lessons learned from their failures and their successes alike.